He was the Empire's pride. For decades, Dr. James Barry was whispered about in barracks, hospitals, and even the halls of London. A fiery man, quick to duel, brilliant with his scalpel, and unafraid of generals. His reputation, unstoppable. His legacy, the surgeon who had performed the impossible, saving both mother and child during a caesarean in Cape Town, where others had always failed. But in 1865, as cholera ate away at him in London, Barry made one strange request to the nurse at his side. "When I die, bury me in the clothes I wear. No bathing, no undressing, just bury me as I am." That request alone would have saved a secret bigger than any Empire scandal. But the nurse disobeyed. When his breathing stopped, silence filled the room. The nurse moved to undress him, preparing his body for burial. She tugged at the stiff collar, loosened the belt, and pulled the uniform coat open. Then she froze, her face drained of color. Because the body she revealed was not the man the world had known. James Barry, the Empire's surgeon, was a woman. The room tilted. For the nurse, time seemed to stop. Her hands shook as she backed away. Everything she thought she knew about the man collapsed in one instant. This was no small scandal. This was treason against an entire system. Word spread quickly. Assistants summoned to help with preparations rushed into the room, only to be struck dumb by the sight. "It can't be," one muttered. Another made the sign of the cross. Some swore. Some laughed nervously, unable to process what they were seeing. A man who had lived his whole life as a soldier, a doctor, a gentleman, was a woman. And the more they thought about it, the more it made sense. His refusal to be examined by doctors, his high, sharp voice, his refusal to let anyone touch him. Suddenly, the puzzle pieces clicked into place. But the picture they formed was one no one was ready to face. The authorities wanted silence. The British Army issued strict orders. The doctor was to be buried at once. No autopsy, no further questions. A lid slammed shut on the scandal, but secrets leaked like smoke through cracks. Whispers ran through the ranks, across Cape Town into London drawing rooms. A surgeon who had risen to the rank of Inspector General. A surgeon who had reformed army hospitals, challenged Florence Nightingale herself, and saved thousands. And yet, beneath the starched collar and medals, was someone the system would have never allowed. A woman. The name carved into the headstone was James Barry. No mention of Margaret. No clue of what had just been uncovered. But outside the graveyard, the whispers only grew louder. Who was this surgeon, really? How had she, Margaret Ann Bulkley, tricked an empire into believing she was a man for more than 50 years? And why had she lived a life built on disguise, sacrifice, and unbreakable will? To answer that, we have to rewind, not to the empire at its peak, but to Cork, Ireland, where a young girl was given an impossible choice: stay invisible or steal a man's identity and defy the world. In Cape Town, whispers ran through the colonial hospital. A woman in labor, her screams echoing through stone halls. The midwives shook their heads. This was hopeless. Every caesarean before had ended the same way. A dead mother, a dead child, or both. But Dr. James Barry stepped forward, his face pale, eyes burning. "Prepare the table," he barked. The staff hesitated. To cut open a living woman was barbaric, but Barry's authority silenced them. With trembling hands, the mother was placed on a rough wooden slab, candles flickering above. For the first time in history, on African soil, the knife cut deep. steady, precise. And against every law of chance, when the final stitch was tied, both mother and child were alive. Gasps filled the ward. The child's cry cut through the silence like a blade. Nurses fell to their knees, some weeping, others laughing hysterically. The impossible had just been done. Barry didn't celebrate. He ordered the wound cleaned, the instruments boiled, the child swaddled. Then, only then, did he allow himself a faint smile. That single operation made his name echo across the empire. A miracle worker, a surgeon of genius. What no one saw was the sweat running down his back, the quiet terror that if he slipped, if his disguise cracked for even a moment, his life was finished. The operation became legend. Soldiers gossiped about it over campfires. Civilians repeated it in crowded taverns. James Barry had done what no other surgeon dared. But behind the curtain of fame, the mask was tightening. Every word he spoke, every move he made was a performance. Every handshake, every glance was a test of his disguise. And in a world where women weren't even allowed to train as doctors, Margaret Ann Bulkley had just outperformed them all. Barry's fame spread far beyond Africa. Governors, generals, and officers whispered his name with respect. He was promoted, decorated, and called upon for impossible cases. Yet to Barry, the miracle was a double-edged sword. Every new honor drew eyes closer to him. Every accolade tightened the risk. For one slip, one exposed scar, one suspicious hand could undo not just his career, but his entire existence. The mothers survived. The child grew. But history, as cruel as it is, forgot their names. Only Barry's name lived on. Yet the truth was locked inside him. The truth that he wasn't Barry at all. He was Margaret. The world's first successful caesarean in Africa, written into textbooks, credited to a man that never existed. In Ireland, 1809, a young girl stood at the edge of the impossible. Margaret Ann Bulkley, thin, restless, staring at the closed doors of a world that told her, "You cannot enter." Women were forbidden in medical schools. The only roles available to her were marriage or servitude. But her family, desperate and bold, devised a plan so dangerous it bordered on madness. Margaret would vanish. In her place, a young man would appear, James Barry, her dead uncle's name resurrected. It wasn't a disguise for a night. It would be a disguise for life. Her hair was cut short, men's clothes stitched in secret. The name James Barry signed onto forged documents. With trembling hands, Margaret stepped across the threshold, leaving her identity behind. In her reflection, she no longer saw herself. She saw a stranger who would walk into lectures, into anatomy theaters, into examinations where women were never allowed. The masquerade began in Edinburgh. Fellow students mocked Barry for his high-pitched voice, his short stature, his boyish frame. But inside lecture halls, Margaret's mind blazed. She devoured anatomy, dissected corpses, memorized diseases, and outperformed her peers. Every exam passed was another nail in the coffin of her old life. She could never go back. But the disguise came at a cost. She had to avoid changing rooms, medical examinations, drunken nights with fellow students. One mistake would reveal her secret. She lived like a ghost among men, present but untouchable. At night, in her dormitory, she pressed her face into the pillow and reminded herself, "I must not slip. I must not forget. I am James Barry now." Graduation came. The diploma bore the name James Barry. Margaret was erased from the page, from history itself. The world saw only a man, eager and brilliant, stepping forward into the British Army's medical ranks. For Margaret, it was freedom and a life sentence. Barry entered the British Army with a storm behind his eyes. The Empire's colonies were rotting with disease, dysentery, cholera, fevers. Soldiers died faster from illness than from bullets. In filthy hospitals, men screamed in corridors, amputations performed without anesthesia, maggots writhing in bandages. Barry walked into that nightmare with fury. He demanded clean water, proper ventilation, sanitation. He didn't ask, he ordered. Soldiers grumbled, officers balked, but slowly, death rates dropped. The surgeon was building something bigger than a reputation. He was building fear. Barry's temper was infamous. He cursed generals, insulted administrators, and once even challenged a man to a duel at dawn. Officers whispered that he was mad, arrogant, untouchable. Yet no one could deny the results. Death rates plummeted wherever he served. Mothers, soldiers, even prisoners lived because of his reforms. The Empire, without knowing, owed its survival in part to a surgeon hiding behind a mask. His postings spanned the world: South Africa, the Caribbean, Canada, Malta. Each place left scars, not just on his patients, but on him. The further he rose in rank, the more eyes bore down on him. Yet the disguise held. His voice sharp, his manner brusque, his private life locked tighter than a coffin. He became a surgeon's surgeon, admired and hated in equal measure. Behind his reforms, though, was rage. Rage at an empire that would have crushed him if it had known the truth. Rage at a system that barred women from saving lives. Barry wielded medicine like a weapon, every successful operation a blow against the rules that erased him. His life was no longer his own. It was a performance, relentless, exhausting, brilliant. By the 1850s, Barry had become Inspector General of Military Hospitals, one of the highest ranks a surgeon could hold. He had won the Empire's trust completely. The irony was brutal. The system that rejected women had unknowingly crowned one as its champion. It was inevitable that two titans of medicine would collide. In the Crimean War, Florence Nightingale, the lady with the lamp, revolutionized battlefield nursing. But when she crossed paths with Dr. Barry, sparks flew. Barry dismissed her reforms, barked orders at her, accused her of negligence. Nightingale, furious, wrote later, "He was the most disgusting creature I ever met." The clash became legend. Nightingale represented compassion, order, a softer touch. Barry represented fury, discipline, and uncompromising precision. They despised each other, yet unknowingly shared the same mission, saving lives in a world drowning in blood. Behind Barry's rage was something Nightingale could not see: the suffocating fear of exposure. Every day, he lived one mistake away from ruin. To her, he was arrogant. To him, she was naive. Neither could know the other carried the weight of secrets and expectations that threatened to crush them both. Every disguise demands sacrifice. For Barry, it was intimacy. He could never marry, never confess, never let a soul see his body. His rooms were guarded, his baths private, his medical exams refused. He lived like a fortress. Every laugh, every friendship, every bond kept at arm's length. Rumors swirled. Was he a hermaphrodite? A eunuch? A castrato? Men whispered in barracks, women speculated in salons. Barry ignored them all, burying himself deeper in work. Yet, behind the iron mask, Margaret still lived, buried alive, suffocating, unseen. The cost of deception grew heavier with age. His health faltered, his temper sharpened. Yet still he worked, still he fought, still he operated. Because without the mask, he was nothing. Without James Barry, Margaret Bulkley would never exist again. In 1865, in London, Barry collapsed. Cholera tore through his body. On his deathbed, he begged, "Do not undress me. Bury me in these clothes." He knew his secret would not survive exposure, but his nurse disobeyed. When she stripped the body, the world cracked open. Margaret Bulkley lay before her, a secret hidden for 50 years, spilled into the open. The nurse staggered back, gasping, clutching the sheets. She ran to tell others. Officials tried to suppress it. They ordered a swift burial, no autopsy. The coffin sealed, the grave marked only with the name James Barry. But the whispers spread like fire. The doctor had been a woman. The empire had been fooled. Journalists dug into the past. Letters surfaced. Family accounts emerged. Margaret Bulkley's life was pieced together. The girl from Cork who vanished. The uncle's name stolen. The masquerade that shook an empire. The ultimate irony was brutal. An empire that silenced women had unknowingly raised one to the very peak of its medical ranks. The uniform, the medals, the honors, all pinned to a name that was never real. The same laws that would have barred Margaret from the lecture hall had crowned her as the empire's most brilliant surgeon. What remains is not just scandal, but a question. How should history remember her? As a liar who deceived an empire? Or as a pioneer who saved lives by defying it? The answer lies in the operating theaters she transformed, the patients who lived, and the barrier she shattered. James Barry was a mask. Margaret Bulkley was the truth behind it. Together they forced history to confront its own blindness.